Hey guys, how you doing? Eric at SoCal Cigars. Hope you guys are having an awesome day. Hope you guys are dealing with the stay-at-home order and quarantining as best you can. I think we're on the other side of it. I think it's going to start getting better, so let's hope for that. Anyway, today I wanted to kind of go over a few humidor tips and tricks and thoughts that I had that might be useful for you. Just kind of things I've noticed or have learned that I think I could pass along that might be helpful in your your humidor situation at your own house. So one thing is in regards to the unit I have, which is, if you've seen my videos, the Whynter 400 count refrigerated humidor. So in regard to that, I wanted to mention that before the weather has recently changed and now we're in the mid 90s here in Southern California, for the last 2 months I've had my humidor unplugged. And I kind of did that because I'm thinking in terms of, well, it being on or plugged in isn't really doing a whole lot as far as humidity goes. It's really doing temperature control. And if the temperature in the room it's in, my humidor's in, is already where I want it to be anyway, there's no reason to be running that unit. And for me, it's a couple things. One, it's going to be electricity. Obviously it's running, you're paying for that. But two, I'm thinking of, in my eyes, every minute I'm not running that humidor is another minute it's going to last longer. So if I don't need to have that thing plugged in, I don't have it plugged in. So really it was only, I think, maybe 3 days ago that I had to plug it back in because I was getting in the high 70s in my temperature. So anyway, that's one of my thoughts, is that if you've got a refrigerated humidor and your temperatures are stable in your house at the time being, or the season that it is, unplug it. You don't really need to have it plugged in. At that rate, you're just controlling the humidity like you would normally anyway, which doesn't have a whole lot to do with it being plugged in. Anyway, so hopefully that might be a helpful tip for you. Another thing in regard to humidors in general, not just refrigerated units, but acrylic, tabletop, whatever you've got, a big gigantic igloo or Tupperware container, whatever you have. When it comes to humidity, you've got to think of it in a couple ways. There's a couple methods of humidification. There's one that's going to be like a passive two-way humidification process, and there's going to be one method that's really just pushing out humidity. Okay, so if you're using something like a Oasis unit where it's just basically foam and filled with water, and then it's a electronic unit so that it's measuring and putting out humidity as needed, understand that you're only putting out humidity. Okay, same with like Humi-Care beads. If you're using the beads that, little blue or clear beads that you pour distilled water in to refresh every once in a while, keep in mind, those are just releasing humidity into the air. They're not necessarily, I think they're supposed to, but they don't seem to that much. They're not really pulling humidity back in. But when you're looking at something like I use the Heartfelt industry beads, or you're looking at things like Boveda, those are both two-way active humidification. So what does that mean? What that means is if there's not enough humidity in your humidor, it's going to release humidity to get it to the predetermined humidity range that device or beads or whatever have been programmed or conditioned to be in. So let's say, for example, 65. If it's below 65, it's going to release until it hits that 65 again. If it goes above where it's supposed to be, it will actually pull humidity back into the beads or into the Boveda pack. So that's kind of key. That's really what you want. So if you've never, for example, let's say Boveda, because that's such a popular product and it's such a great product. It isn't what I tend to use. I mean, I think I have some in there, but I do use them for shipping and for, traveling. But if you were to rip one of those packs open, it's not just like a pack filled with like distilled water. It's actually it's a very viscous white type of concoction of basically salt and a suspension liquid that is basically holding water, humidity. And then there's a membrane, and then there's the outside kind of brown paper pack you're seeing. So the key to their technology is basically that suspended salt and the membrane. So the way they've engineered it is that if you buy, let's say, the 65 or 69 or whichever one you buy, it's predetermined to want to be at that humidity level in whatever environment you put it in. So if you go below, it's releasing humidity. If you go above, it's pulling humidity back in. That's really key. And I think a lot of people don't think about that because you're maybe in a environment or a part of the country or world that your biggest problem is not having enough humidity in your humidor. Okay, but where you live in places like where I live or like the Midwest or things like that, you're running into an issue where there's too much humidity and you're literally trying to figure out how to get humidity to come back out of your humidor. So that can actually be almost a bigger problem because it's kind of really easy to add more humidity. It's more difficult to take humidity back out. And when it comes to the beads, like the Heartfelt industry beads I'm using or the Boveda packs, I think a lot of misconception is that if the humidity is going too high, you're kind of like, oh crap, I need to pull some beads out or I need to pull out some of the packs. It's actually not true. So stay with me on this one because it takes a minute to get this in your head, I think. If you've got too much humidity in a certain sized environment, like your humidor, you need to have enough capacity in either beads or Boveda packs to pull in that amount of too much humidity. Okay, so if you have too much humidity and you're running Boveda packs, it isn't necessarily that you need to pull packs out because there's too much humidity. You might actually need to add more in because you've gone past the capacity for those packs to absorb enough humidity to get the humidity back down to where it's trying to keep that environment. I hope that makes sense. So again, the misconception could be that if your humidity is too high, you need to pull packs or beads out. It's probably that you need to add more because you've gone past the capacity of what you have in there to absorb the humidity back into those packs or those beads. Okay, so that's really important. That's why it's so important, no matter what you're using, whatever product you're using that's an active two-way humidification process, really look at the specs that they're giving you from that company because they're giving you the amount of product you need to have in a certain square foot or square inch or cubic inch, whatever container you're using. So it's really important to match those specs because if you're not putting enough in, your humidity could end up going too high and it has nowhere to go. And the bad thing is, if it's got nowhere to go, it's going to find a place to go. And it's either going to go into the wood, if you've got like, the Spanish cedar humidor, or it's going to go into your cigars. Okay, because it's going to go somewhere. What you want it to do is to go back into the beads or back into the Boveda packs. Okay, so you need to have enough in there to give it the room and flexibility to raise and lower the humidity to try to keep that environment controlled. Okay, so really important. I think that's something people misunderstand. So I think that's really critical. Another thing right now too, and like the video I just did recently, is to make sure you are doing some cigar rotations. Especially for me with the temperature going up, I really want to make sure that I'm giving all the cigars their fair share at the humidity and at being at different locations in my humidor. Because the humidity level from the bottom to the top of my humidor can be pretty far different. So I think it's really important to pay attention to rotation. And another tip that I'd given a while ago, I think you want to pay attention to as well, is open the door to your humidor or open the lid to your humidor every once in a while, maybe every couple of days, just for a couple of minutes, and just let there be a little exchange of the room environment to the humidor environment. And that really seems to stabilize things for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure on the science behind that, but it does seem to work. I've noticed since I've started doing that, things stabilized. Anyway, so another thing to think about too is when you are going from season to season, really pay attention to your temperature levels and your humidity levels, because when your temperature is rising, it changes your RH. So I notice, like, when my temperature goes up, my RH goes down. So you've really got to make sure that when you're going from a season to a season, like right now we've gone from cooler weather to pretty warm weather. I mean, mid-90s, that's pretty warm. That's going to really change the environment, and especially with me just plugging my unit back in and now going from what was in the upper 70s back down to my unit cools to 66 degrees. I've got to really now watch my humidity levels and see if I need to adjust it. Like for me with the Heartfelt beads, I need to spritz them with some more distilled water or not. The Boveda actually pretty field safe. As long as you have enough packs in there, it's going to continually try to adjust that environment to what packs you bought. Like I would probably get the 69% ones. So that's a pretty good system. And just remember, if you're using kind of this non-two-way system, like if you're using just the green sponge, which I don't recommend, or if you're using like the Oasis, where it's really just pushing moisture out into the air, or I mean, I've seen people just put a little dish of distilled water in there. You know, keep in mind, or the Humi-Care beads, those are just pushing humidity out for the most part. So if you're running into situations where you've got too much humidity, you need to stay on that right away and know you need to pull those out. That is where you would want to actually reduce the amounts that's in there versus making sure there's enough. So anyway, these are just things I think you maybe want to think about to keep your humidor squared away so that your cigars are squared away. It's really just a matter of it's a matter of two things. It's a matter of really paying attention, to me, really on a daily basis, to the environment your humidor is in, and or the environment inside your humidor, what state that's in, and knowing what to do. You know, again, I think a lot of people would think if the humidity is too high, you better pull some of those Boveda packs out. Well, more than likely, you don't have enough in because you're not letting it have that exchange. So I think it's really important that you to know what to do when you see a problem arise. So anyway, I hope some of this has helped. I will put some product links down below so that the things I talked about, you can maybe go look for yourself. And again, always like and subscribe, especially like. I know that for YouTube, they're big on people liking things because that shows that people are watching your videos and that changes their algorithm. So even if you don't want to subscribe, and if you just simply didn't hate this video, at least give me a like because that helps me and I appreciate that. If you want to subscribe, that'd be awesome too, and hit the little bell so you can at least see when I release a video and you'll know about it. Anyway, Eric at SoCal Cigars, continue to have an awesome day. Continue to hang in there. I think we're getting past the worst of this coronavirus action, and I think we'll be back to normal, back to socializing, back to meeting up with your buddies and having some cigars and getting back to enjoying life and putting this ugliness behind us. So hang in there, and I will see you on the next video.